what debt collectors can and cannot do. Now, if you're in the situation where you're being harassed by a debt collector, you know, things probably aren't going that well, and that's understandable. But on top of all that, you don't need your phone ringing all the time, you know, causing more stress in your life.
Someone's like, hey, my and the guy's, you my you.
Now, here's the secret. If you know what debt collectors can and cannot do, you may actually be able to sue them and get some money out of them, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. Now, debt collectors are known for calling and making, kind of make you feel like a terrible person and talk about all this stuff, but here's the thing. You got to know what they can and cannot do. You got to keep good records, and we can go from there. So let's talk about that first. How do debt collectors work? Remember, it's important to note that they are typically paid off what they recover, so they're very incentivized to recover, and that kind of leads them to make a little more aggressive tactics in trying to recover, and that's why we have the FDCPA, which is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Now, the Fair Debt Collection Practices regulates debt collectors. Now, just so we're clear and you understand this, a debt collector is someone who is collecting someone else's debt. So if you have somebody in a doctor's office and the doctor's office calls you, the FDCPA does not apply. Now, if the collection agency calls you, the FDCPA does apply. And most of the time, that's who's going to call you and kind of do this stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Do debt collectors track your phone number? Now, this is a, you know, interesting problem. They do, most of the time, they have access to databases, right? And there's databases out there that keep track of people's phone numbers, addresses, and stuff like that. And they'll subscribe to these databases, and they'll run you through these databases to see what's going on. Or maybe if you get a new phone number, they'll find it out that way. They're also allowed to contact other people and try to get your phone number that way.
People, I have anxiety. That means I'm in my shell and have a hard time expressing myself. I find it difficult to engage with others. So everyone shut the up because my anxiety is up here right now.
Now, they are not allowed to contact your work and try to collect a debt, but they could contact your work and possibly try to get some contact information from your job. So, and also, when we're talking about debt collectors too, realize they are getting, you know, there's a lot of, like for instance now, when you buy a car, sometimes a car is equipped with a device that gives GPS coordinates and will turn off the car if you don't make your payments. So there's other things like that out there, but that's not necessarily a debt collector, that's just the person you bought the car from, the company that way. So those options are available. Now, what can debt collectors do if you don't pay? Typically, the only recourse they're all gonna have is they're gonna file a lawsuit against you. And they're gonna, you know, try to serve you and get notice of that. Once again, if any of that happens, you're better off to be on the front end, because if they get a default judgment and everything else against you and then you don't figure it out until your paycheck's getting garnished by 25%, it's a lot harder to deal with. So it's easier to deal with on the front end and stop all that before it happens. And there's different ways to deal with that. We'll talk about that a little later. Here's the next part. So this is the important part to track while you're going through this, what debt collectors can and cannot say, because this is typically how they get in trouble. And always remember, for every violation of the FDCPA, it is a $1,000 statutory fine. So, you know, if they call you 25 times that they're not supposed to, that's $25,000. So that's why it's good to keep good records, and we'll talk about how to use the FDCPA a little later. But what debt collectors can and cannot say. So here's the big things. They cannot use the threat of violence or other criminal means to harm a person, reputation, or property. So, you know, a lot of times they'll insinuate jail time or insinuate a warrant or something like that. Now also, while you're going through all this, remember, if you got somebody doing this to you, it's never a bad idea to put an app on your phone and record those phone calls. Now, before you do that, you need to make sure that it's okay in your state. Of course, typically they're recording the phone call too. If you're in Arkansas, Arkansas is a single consent state. So only one person needs to know, which is you. You don't have to even tell them. But if you record these phone calls, it's a great way to have proof of exactly what they did. They cannot use obscene or profane language, so no cussing.
Because I'm an uptight buster! You old horny slut!
And no being, they can't use a false representation that they represent some sort of governmental entity. And sometimes these debt collection agencies even have it in their name. So it's not hard to get them on that. You know, the name will kind of lead you to believe that it is some sort of governmental agency, but they can't represent that they are part of any government. Misleading information on the amount or legal status of the debt. This one's interesting, right? Because we've had this happen before where, you know, say you did owe the debt and say, but the debt's old and so the statute of limitations has passed. Well, when they call you and tell you you owe the debt, the legal status of the debt is actually that you do not owe it because the statute of limitations has passed and they actually can't sue you over it. Now, here's an important part. If you make a payment, you actually revive the statute, because the way the statute works, say it's a 3-year statute or a 5-year. Typically in Arkansas, it's a 5-year on a written contract, but say it's a 5-year statute of limitations. It's 5 years from the date of your last payment. So make sure if it's lapsed, you don't make another payment. False implication that they're an attorney or with law enforcement. Once again, they can't make you believe that there's going to be any arrest or imprisonment, but this is a good one. Causing a telephone to ring repeatedly with the intent to annoy, abuse, and harass. This is what they typically do. They just blow up your phone all over the time, okay? Calls outside normal business hours, usually before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. And here's the big one, but that letter we talked about, and if you're curious about that letter, we have a video on that and you can check it out right here. But if you send them the letter and you tell them to stop communicating with you, they cannot communicate with you. So if they call you or contact you after that, every communication is a $1,000 fine under the FDCPA. In our next video, we're going to talk about all the things you need to do to sue under the FDCPA and make the debt collectors pay if they violated any of these rules. Remember to like and subscribe. Thanks.